What are we gonna do?
Good evening, church. Here we are again. Big pause. This is it seems like we've been doing this forever. Feels like this pandemic is, right? We've been living here forever. Well, we wanted to come back for part 2 of living in a post-pandemic world. And we want to start first where we left off last week, this past Sunday, I should say, and then delve into, and the great thing about these conversations are that you don't know where they're really going to end. And that's the beauty of it. You can have a script, but it's nice to deviate and see where the Lord wants to take us. So we ended, and to be honest, I was a bit taken back in delivering that message and talking about the Antichrist and what the Bible really has to say about him and all the different names and the 27 chapters and the 32 titles that the Bible gives for who he is and this person that's going to come on the scene. But we ended really talking about the spirit of the Antichrist. And I think we dialogued, and that's kind of where we want to start in this conversation and what that really looks like. And even in the series, and I told you, Pastor Linda and I, she's been very formative in the series and in really helping me see some things about the enemy and how he's behind the systems of this world. And, you know, we looked at that word world in Romans chapter 12 and what that really means. But, right, guys, I mean, are we seeing the spirit of the in the place? That word Antichrist means in the place of Christ, not just against, but in the place. Yeah. So, where do you guys see that in the world today?
I think the enemy, the devil, Satan. See, he wants to culminate the world to go after him and not God's Son, right? And say, I'm the one you're going to worship. Through this Antichrist person, whatever, but we're talking about the Holy Spirit behind it.
Right.
He's like, I'm really in charge, not you. And I think the devil can't create; he can just manipulate and copy, like Islam and everything else. That all these false prophets that have come afterwards. He's just copying what God's doing, and it's the black and white issue.
Yeah, and I like what you said too, because it reminds me of his goal is always the same from the beginning, right? It's replace God, right? And that's why he was thrown out of heaven, right? Because he wanted to replace God, basically, right? And it's interesting when I look at my own life and I look at our lives, what is it that I'm replacing God with, right? And that's really the enemy's tactic, because in the end, I don't think he really cares what we use to replace God in our lives. You know what I mean? And for some people, it looks good. It's church stuff and works and nice things. And unfortunately, that's why we have that verse. You go to heaven and I did miracles in your name and I did all these things, but I didn't know you. So you can do really good things. So I think that's the question for me is, it's easy, like you said, I think on Sunday, but like he's not going to come with a red pitchfork and a suit and just jump out down the devil and worship me. But it's subtle, and that's why that's good. And when you talk about the Antichrist, the actual Antichrist figure, when he comes on the scene, that's kind of the allure to the world. Like that's why it's so appealing, because it's an angel of light, as the Bible says the devil comes as. So he's coming to deceive.
Did you guys see that show that I mentioned, Lucifer? Did you guys?
I didn't watch it.
No, but it's really interesting. But the world again, like you look at all of the apocalyptic, these dystopian shows out on TV, and even something like that. It's in the air. Yeah. It's here, and as we move closer, you're seeing, proliferation of
the dystopian theme.
But you said something before about the spirit being in the church. Right, even the things that we do, and referencing that passage, like God, we did all these great things in your name, miracles, and
right.
So where do you guys see? You see that really in the church? I mean, I brought up his name, Derek Prince, somebody you love.
Yeah,
me too.
I think that the problem with the church is when you go from just Christ, right, just worshiping Him and taking crucifying Him, to religion, right? Then the Antichrist is right there, right? That's where his field is.
For you, right?
Because Derek Prince said something I thought really was very interesting. He said, people keep God away. They keep God away from them by using religion. God, you stay over there. Right. I'll do what I have to do. Right. Don't kill my kids. Don't kill my parents.
Right. So good.
I'll do it. So we have a deal. Stay there and don't come into my life. It's the perfect Antichrist.
Best book I ever read on that, I would say, and I know you like this book too, Keller's Prodigal God. I think it's his best book. We're all Tim Keller fans. If you want, like, you're looking for a great read, something that really challenge you,
Yeah.
I would definitely say, yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, one of the things I would piggyback on what you guys just said is, to me, try to simplify it, right? And to me, it's like any time, and it's all throughout the Bible and the scriptures when Paul's talking to the churches and stuff.
Right.
Anytime you're adding something to Christ, you're off the mark. And Satan's always in that arena, waiting for that opportunity, right? So if it's adding Jewish customs and traditions at a church to say, well, you're not really yeah, Christ, but you need to do these other things, and that's what religion is.
So
Religion comes in and says,
right.
well, you're good, but you need to do these other things too. And then you've taken Christ off the throne because now he's not the only way, as you talked about. He's not the only thing you need. You can do other things.
Yeah.
And here's the difference. Like even in the Jewish religion, that at the beginning, after they set up the sacrifice, how many days a year did they fast? One.
Mm.
But when Jesus came on the scene, it was twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
So you went from 1 to 104, which that 103 is all religion and worthless.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it's like, look at me, I'm going to church twice a week, and it's that fine line between following Christ and just becoming a Christian in name only.
Yeah, and it reminds me of that verse too. That's your reward, right? If you're going to fast and tell everybody about it, and
So
you're going to
true.
make a big thing about it, well, that's your reward. That's what you're going to get. You get the pat on the
so
back. It's a
true.
great job. You're doing a great job. I wish I was like you.
And what scares me about it,
Yeah.
what we were talking just before, is that the people who do all these things, Jesus says, I never knew you.
Right?
Go away.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, these people did miracles.
No, they're doing
It wasn't like they,
They're doing great
they just tied
They're
it.
doing a lot more than life.
Yeah, that's exactly what scares me, John, is that they did some really big things, and Jesus is like, I don't know you.
And again, to keep it simple, right? Well, I think what Jesus is always getting at the heart of things, right? What's behind it? What were your motives?
Exactly.
Well, that's part of even the Bema seat when we talked about that, and a lot of our motives, behind what we do. Why are we really doing things, and always praying about that. And you brought up religion. Go ahead.
Right. No, we think what's right and wrong,
Yeah,
but really is, are you born from the earth or are you born from above?
that's good.
That's the real difference.
Yeah, very
Right?
good.
Because even the right is wrong on that side.
Yeah, so
Because
true.
the good people that keep God away by using religion are actually very good people their whole life.
Yeah.
They don't get to heaven.
Because
Because
young ruler,
Exactly.
the Pharisees used to literally put makeup on.
why did the rich young ruler go to Christ? Because he knew there was something missing.
Yeah.
He had everything.
Had
He did everything.
Ted, it's funny you say that. I literally thought about that recently, about his motivation, like before that conversation ensued. And as I was reading that verse, it hit me that, when you look at, because he knows, right, well, I do this, I do everything. I got it all fair. I really feel like he might have come to Jesus with the motivation of, I'm going to get some reinforcement and show everybody how
Absolutely.
good I am. So I'm setting this conversation up to get the
And make it public.
Yeah.
because-
And I think that was really his motivation. And I think that's what Jesus was getting at more than anything else.
Right.
So obviously that's why he hid him where he lives. The hardest thing was going to be to turn away from all your stuff.
Right.
He couldn't do
He
it.
was getting ready for commendation, like
Yeah.
right,
Gosh,
it's you. You're the one.
Right.
Disciples,
Oh,
Peter.
I've been waiting for you to
Move to the front of the class.
Fuck the second step aside. Here it is.
Very, very true.
And that's what we all think. Honestly, me being self-centered, you go into church and think, well, everyone's going to go, oh, he becomes a really spiritual guy.
Yeah.
So we're all that person who wants to be center stage, and the devil just plays that in our lives all the time, right?
Can you talk to now? I think also the spirit of the Antichrist. Can we talk to consumer Christianity?
Oh, boy.
I mean, because that is something that's. I mean, it's everywhere. It's prevalent in the church today.
Yeah, I'll start with somebody who you may have never heard before, Derek Prince.
No.
But he talked about how
Scholar again. If somebody's listening, he's
Oxford scholar was one of the most brilliant men in Oxford. He was at 24, became the head of his department, and he knew Greek back and forth.
Still watch some of his sermons.
Yeah,
And-
online,
yeah.
YouTube.
But he talked about no, I forgot what we were talking
consumer
about.
Christianity.
And he talked about how, well,
Yeah.
About-
However you want to. Yeah.
consumer being worship has become, I'm going to sit back and watch. And he kind of blamed it on, which is 30 years ago, more like Nashville. It became worship and it became sort of performance oriented. You sit back, we'll do the job. And it's typical religion. You're out there and we're the people doing it. You just watch what we're doing. And I think that whole consumer oriented is I'll just sit back, I'll consume. And the devil entertains us till the day we die, so we don't get to do anything. Because we're just consumers.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, talk to even, because you've said this before, that was great. Talk to like what we even see in the church in terms of how all the lights and it's the show, it's how we become very entertainment driven.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's not for bad intentions, right?
No,
I think that, the
Yeah.
problem with the church is that the world is in the church, right? And so I think a lot of times these ideas of, flashy music or, just programs, centering these in coffee, right? None of these things are bad in themselves, but I think we've kind of lost our way because we're trying to appeal to people to say, come give Christianity a shot, come take a look at us, and the problem that I've had with just the Western church is it almost feels to me like we've gotten to a point where the salvation call, the mission that we're commanded to do as Christians is calling people to our churches as opposed to calling people to Christ.
Right.
And it's a little different, and it's like
Very good.
we're calling people to grow our church, and nobody admits this, right? You talk to any church, they say, no, we don't care about numbers, we're not into numbers, and yeah, to a point, but our actions speak louder than words. And I think the struggle that I guess for me that I look at is, how do we as a church globally, how do we in Western culture take the culture of the world out of the church? And for me, the church has always been different, right? It's always stood for things. It's always, the voice of the minority in the wilderness crying out for righteousness and justice. And those are the things that I think we need to get back to.
Having a mariner background, I always thought about the church in the culture is great, right? But the culture in the church
It's not.
is not. Like a ship in the water is great, but water in the ship is really bad.
Yeah, no, that's not good. Yeah.
So that brought it home to me when somebody mentioned it that way.
But I guess that's the question,
Do
right?
you ever think we're going to evict?
Right. How do you get there?
Yeah, how do you...
Like, you can't ask people to change at the door, right? Like, okay, you're in this world for
Right.
6.5 days.
Right. Shake off the dust.
Give
and
us 2 hours a
Right.
week of not, bringing your preconceived notions and your, and in a lot of ways, and that's why I think the conversation with the spirit of the Antichrist and things is really important, because my heart breaks for me and everybody else, particularly in this country, when you look at just the bombardment of advertising, the bombardment of just the culture always pounding at our door. It's hard. It's a wave. It's a tsunami.
Yeah, it's a tsunami.
And
That's a good term.
what chokes the growth of the seeds when there's the
Right.
sowing of the seed?
Yeah.
The good things,
Cares of the
the
world.
cares of the
Yeah.
world,
Right.
right? So it's like, I'm not doing anything bad, but the world is choking out your
Yeah.
spirit.
And it's a great point too when you talk about eschatology, right? Because the world, watch and pray, look for my return. But if you're saying to yourself, and we all, depending what age you are and everything, I get it. I'm kind of enjoying things right now. Or I have a good life going right now. Or, I'm not really ready to go yet. I got some things I want to do first. If we're in that mindset, I don't know that we're ready for Christ to return, and that's scary.
And Jesus, when he's in Revelations, when he spoke to the 7 churches, it was just 1 or 2 that he did not.
They had nothing
rebuke.
against them.
Right.
But like Ephesus,
Yeah.
Ephesus was the church,
Yeah,
right? Ephesus, Timothy was the pastor.
Right.
Apparently, John brought Mary there. I mean,
Right.
this is like an
Yeah,
all-star cast.
yeah.
They had a lot
all-star
of things
team,
going,
right.
and he had to go and say, "Hey guys,
I have this
I
against
have
you.
this against you." So the people say, "Well, he can't be in the church." Wherever there's life, the enemy is there trying to take it away.
That's
So-
a great statement.
So
Wherever there's life, the enemy
So
is there.
if there's not a problem, maybe you're not on the right track, right? Because the world sees somebody, they're having problems, then that's bad. But for the churches, if you're overcoming things,
Yeah.
it's because there is an enemy.
Wow, this is I think it's a really great conversation. And I think it resonated with people to some extent.
You
seeing
mentioned
it.
that
Yeah, and I was again surprised by that. I didn't expect there to be such a strong reaction to that for people to see that. I guess even in their own lives where they are, a couple of people say it was like cold water to see where I'm at, my spiritual temperature. You know, even we always talk about Laodicea.
Yeah.
I've heard Pastor Linda talk about that since I was young. They thought they were right. I mean, it's what they thought about themselves, the picture they had of themselves,
Exactly.
and how they were really at the end of the day.
They had no idea.
They had no idea.
That's the
To
scary
be
part.
that blind and for us to not see. And I think that's part of this pandemic. Coming out of this, one of the beautiful things is the need for community, the need for each other to see the other person's blind spots, to see where
Well,
we need some
if
help.
you watch those shows about Africa and the wolves and the coyotes, they always get in that last one who's away from the herd,
Yeah,
right?
so
And
true.
the same, I'm sure the same with the devil and his minions, and they're gonna, if you're gonna stay by yourself, you are fair game for them.
Yeah.
Sounds like screw tape letters.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, really.
No.
Yeah, because I read an article and I was telling Pastor Leonard before this. I'll share it with you guys too. It was an article like looking at the Screw Tape Letters is a book by C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest apologists of all time, and he writes this book. It's an older demon talking to a younger demon, and he's mentoring him about how to attack Christians. And it's so revelatory. These letters that he's writing to him, and it's so revelatory. And C.S. Lewis would say it was the hardest book he ever wrote.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
I was hoping
So, yeah, it tormented him, in dealing with this whole topic. But this guy wrote an article through the lens of
Oh,
COVID.
that's very interesting.
So yeah, I'll share that with you. You were going to say something.
No, I just think, touching on what we've been talking about, I mean, I think somebody said taking your temperature or something, and I just think,
right.
I think that
That's interesting. They do that now. I'm just thinking as you're saying that
yeah,
everywhere we go,
right, everything's
it's
about
going to be taking
maybe
your
scanner.
Hey,
Can't go to the airport.
we should do that when people walk in the church.
Right.
well, spiritually, I think
You take your
individually,
spiritual temperature.
yeah, I mean, we should be doing
Yeah.
that.
I love my
You can't
comment.
stand
I mean, we should be doing that spiritually throughout a day. Like,
Yeah.
and I hate to use shoulds, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, these are things that we need to think about. And I think if we're not checking ourselves or asking questions, the cold water, where am I, where am I, replacing Christ in my own life? And I need to ask that. I don't just say that once and walk away and never ask that question again. I have to ask that question like 10 times a day.
Here's the problem, John. For someone not self-aware like myself, I need other people to speak into my life to do that, because I can fool myself for a long time about what my temperature is and what
But
it should be.
I feel like not a lot of people are really looking for that. And it's interesting.
Right.
You know what? To be honest with you,
Right.
as a pastor, when people come and my folks could they could share their thoughts on this, but when people come and they ask you a question, or hey, I need some prayer on this, I feel like a lot of times can you just tell me what I need to hear? What I've already made a decision about.
Right.
Can you just confirm that for me as the man of God or whatever, as the pastor?
Right.
It's amazing. There's such a sense of independence.
Yes.
We don't really have that. I don't feel that many people are looking for others to really talk into their lives.
No.
When we
No,
make decisions,
because you have to make some decisions you may not like if you're listening to
but that's also the spirit of the Antichrist, and I think that's rampant in the church too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I do it in my own life.
We all do. No, listen, we all do.
Yeah.
We're not talking.
Yeah.
Listen,
Right.
we're all
Talking to the
guilty.
mirror.
Yeah,
Man in the mirror.
absolutely.
There's many verses though that always come to remind me of Proverbs. That the Proverbs are so deep in those.
Oh my
like
gosh.
8 words, and you can be like, oh my
Right.
gosh.
Just
And it's
chew
so
on it
many
for the
times
day.
about being the fool who doesn't take advice from counsel, and so
Wisdom's
many
found in a
times.
multitude
Yeah,
of counsels.
multi-
I live with that.
And there's so
Live
many
with that.
verses that say the
Like
same
that.
thing in
Same
different
thing,
ways.
different ways. Yeah.
Because we don't get it. We all think that, well, my way's right. And you said this last week, and then you can jump in. The echo chambers we live in, in social media and stuff now, it's
Yeah.
even harder to hear something else from somebody because we either shut it out or we can't get it or don't want it.
Go ahead, Ted.
Proverbs, I heard somebody years ago say that the definition of the fool in Proverbs was somebody who never grew up.
Ah,
And it's still childish as they grow up.
Mhm.
And that's physically, but I think it's the same parallel tracks as spiritually.
Mm.
Some people need to grow up because they need to hear from people outside of them saints who have gone down this road before
Yeah.
and say, you may want to think about this, or do you want to think about doing that? And they're like, no, I got it all down.
I
Right.
think Richard Rohr was the one that said you should have somebody that's above you, ahead of you,
Yeah.
somebody that's with you, and somebody that's below you.
Safest
Safest, right?
place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see in terms of where again, going with our theme in the church moving into a post-pandemic world, what do you see with the church and maybe how the church will look different? We can't go back to the way things were. And again, I'm worried about that. Everything you read about, articles everywhere, the new normal, what that's going to look like. I think it would be folly for us as the church to just go back and do the same things.
The one thing that I'm afraid of, and this is before I answer the question, is there may not be a new normal. A lot of people are kidding themselves.
I agree with you.
In the church, outside the church, they're just going to get back on that treadmill where it's their career or this type of thing. And I think we said last week, this is a blessing. It's a forced Sabbath.
Right.
We need to take a look. And I do think you said it a month or two before. You got up and you said, listen,
Oh, before the pandemic.
before the pandemic,
Yeah.
we just can't go on in this. How did you say it?
It
You
was
said,
part of our conversations, and I think, I remember that was a Sunday. I guess it resonated with people, and we
A lot of
had a
people.
leadership meeting, and
Right.
Pastor Linda and I were talking. And a lot of what comes out on a Sunday is not just it's a lot of our
Sure.
conversations. So I always say to people, you don't hear her every Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But you do hear her. So I always want people to remember that. And I remember we were talking more about that, and there was just something, and I think in both of us, and even Pastor
Right.
Joe, that there was an uneasiness with the way church, we can't keep doing church like this. And listen, church, as you're listening to this, we're talking to go back and just do the traditional 4 songs, take the table, a 40 to 45 minute traditional sermon. Is that the old wineskin? Is that what is God saying? There's something new. I'm doing something new. Behold, a new thing I'm going to be doing.
I think the one thing here good about our church, this local church, is we hear God. Because I've been to a lot of more than other churches, and maybe because it's the times we're in, we're squinting through a fog, like it says in the Message Bible, kissing. But we started the open worship, the open church, which is a glimpse of the way the church was in the first century, and the way we probably think it should
I think
be.
it's a prophetic picture.
I
I think it was a prophetic picture, absolutely, of
I
what
agree.
was going on in the church. And you both have been around. Have you ever seen that many people come out for an open church meeting on a Wednesday night? It wasn't 1 or 2 weeks; it was weeks.
But not only that, people participated, and people were giving in. It was like Paul said, a scripture, a witness, a song. The church was. The problem is we've got it backwards in the church as a general in the Western Hemisphere. Come and fill me up on Sunday.
Ted, please say that's
And we should be. My life is so rich during the week from my small groups and the people around me that I'm going to contribute on Sunday and fill other people's tanks instead of, please fill me because I've slid into home plate. I'm completely exhausted. I need to be filled up before I get to bed.
It's
We
the
talk about
opposite
that.
of consumer Christianity, right? It's not taking and getting, it's giving,
Just give.
right? And really, that's
Okay.
serving, right? I mean, that's what Jesus talked about, serving, right? And we talk about life. I mean, I'm just thinking as you guys are talking, it talks about the Spirit of God being like a river. And when you think about a river, a river's like uncontrollable sometimes. It moves kind of where it was. There's life in the river that you think of marine life or plants or and then I'm thinking of just life. When we think of our own lives, we don't think of eating the same food every day, doing the exact same thing every day. That would eventually you go, this isn't living. This is this is terrible.
That goes back to, and I should pull up a really great quote from reading a Tozer book, and I came across it. A.W. Tozer, a church leader from the 20th century, and the name of the book is Rut, Rot, or Revival. And the beginning of the book I think is absolutely fabulous, and he hits on a lot of this about so much of what we have going on in the church that we walk in and it's just the same routine. It's rote,
Yeah.
And some people go and they'll disparage, and I get upset when people look at the Catholic Church and they just do the same thing. Well, look at Protestantism and many Protestant churches. It's really the same thing.
Yeah, same
So
way.
Tozer speaking prophetically, again, using that word, writing this book years ago, but oh wow, how does it speak to our church culture today?
There's a lot of church, if you know the scriptures, Ichabod written across it,
yes.
because in the Old Testament
Yes.
it meant
But yeah.
God had the Spirit already left, or God had left.
Yeah.
He's left the building.
Left the building,
Yeah.
and he's left. People say religion is declining in the West. I'm not sure that's exactly true. Certainly, a lot of the mainline churches, the Protestant, not the Baptist, but the Lutheran and the Catholic, because it's just a form without life.
Without
And so
no
after
power,
a while, you say,
without
why should I
power.
fool myself? Listen, everybody worships something on Sunday morning.
Oh, Ted, that's good.
Either
Yeah, see,
church,
you worship something.
right,
You
or
worship
your
something.
car, right, or you walk your dogs or whatever, your career.
Yeah.
Everybody worships on Sunday
Sounds
morning. It's
like
just
that.
different things.
Reminds me of the Bob Dylan song, you gotta worship somebody.
Right, you gotta serve
It
somebody.
may be serve somebody. Maybe
Yeah.
the devil, it may be the Lord, but you gotta serve somebody.
Well, it's so true.
Can I read a quote from Tozer? It's a little long. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, the treacherous enemy facing the Church of Jesus Christ today. Again, he wrote this years ago. So the treacherous enemy, he says, is the dictatorship of the routine. When the routine becomes Lord in the life of the church, programs are organized and the prevailing conditions are accepted as normal. Anyone can predict next Sunday's service and what will happen. This seems to be the most deadly threat in the church today. And he goes on about that. You get the point?
Yeah, but I mean, that's what
Wait,
I was saying
yeah.
earlier. I just wanted to say, it's like I said, Satan will sit back and wait for whatever you want to use to replace or get away from Christ and Jesus and his work and just him alone, like coming together to just worship him and to hear, about him and commune with him. That's what it's about. And every time we get away from that, it's a problem. And I think, as I'm thinking about it too, there's all these, other religions and things, Eastern religions, you get into this whole kind of chaos versus, stability and structure, right?
Yeah.
The yin and the yang thing, right? It's this constant battle. Right. And I think as human beings, we have this desire to control the chaos, right? We want to control the chaos, which makes no sense in itself, right? But I think, we're always trying man is trying to control our environment, our things, and new wineskins versus old wineskins. You have to be fluid every week. You can't just say this is what we're going to do. So I think that, as you're saying, as a church,
That's part of the excitement. Go ahead, what were you going to say first?
No, I just thought about controlling the chaos. I didn't understand that until I went to the maritime school. And we go out on the training ship during the summer.
Yeah.
And one of the commandants said to me once, "This is a ship of controlled mistakes." Because you're learning at sea. It's not, there's a whole bunch of green people and just a few guys who are seasoned, making sure you don't run aground.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's right. We like chaos. To a certain extent, I think people would like a little chaos. Let me just control it.
Right.
It's like fire,
Right.
right? You're gonna get burnt.
Right.
Hey, guys, too, and the other thing we have to talk about, the church is in a transition. And you look at the Bible. Pastor Linda, it was great when she brought up, when we had talked before this conversation we're having right now, the word essential, right? You keep hearing that word essential. And, President Trump saying the church is essential and that he was going to override governors that tried to stop churches from meeting. What is essential for us as the church as we move out of this pandemic and into this, again, people go, I just want my normal life back again. I'm not going to get that, probably. But what are the essential things? Obviously, Christ being at the center of everything that we do. And we can't lose sight of that, right? But you look at all the transitions in the Old Testament, moving into the New Testament, and for us, it's so important for us to really seize the moment here and hear what God is saying.
I think, again, something that the leadership here in this church did, hearing the footsteps coming that we didn't know were coming,
Right.
was by doing communion every week.
Mm.
And I think you could
That's good,
probably
Ted.
tell the temperature of a church by how often they do communion.
Yeah.
Because usually when I was in the bigger churches, it was the first and third Sunday.
Right.
And if something came up, you skipped it. So you didn't do communion for a month.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you were traveling like me, you missed
We've
it.
gone through that phase.
But I think communion was the Lord, was started in the upper room is very essential. It's very essential to.
I mean, what's the communion table doing, right? Remember me. Like, it's really just calling you back to Him, right? So at its core, I think that's what it is. And so we come in, our minds are swirling, and then it's like you get to the table and it centers you. You know, and it's like we need that in this culture to just say, I need to just remember Christ, what He did for me, you know.
It's remembering,
Right.
It's proclaiming to the world, and
Exactly.
it's looking forward to His coming.
All at the same time.
And like you said, that's funny. Richard Rohr, who's a famous,
Mm.
somewhat famous
Catholic
Catholic
priest, yeah.
friar,
Right.
said, you know, you don't find the center finds you.
Mm.
And then one day you're there, and the communion kind of just makes sense to you.
Mm.
And it just, because the thing about Christianity is, it's not like religion, right? It's the opposite. It's you getting out of the way and letting the Spirit come in and telling you what's really real in life.
Yeah.
And when communion comes alive to you those days, it's not every day, right? Some days we do our prayers in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta do my prayers. And some days I'm really into it. I'm not sure which counts more for God, you know. But communion too. I mean, we can't go and say, oh, if I just wasn't with it. That's the day you really need it. And God, let's say, God, I don't know. Just you need to just be alive.
Well, we can get so caught up in our feelings to how I feel.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Today,
Hey, you may not feel what you think. You know, we have this idea, this notion. We walk into that, you know, in the morning in our devotional time,
Right.
what it's supposed to feel like,
Right.
and it doesn't feel that way. And there's so much more that's happening on the inside that maybe we're not cognizant of.
Right.
Right.
There is a place for the form,
Yeah.
right? There
Yes.
is a place for the everyday
Absolutely.
form.
Yeah.
Or else you'll just be like the '60s. I'll just do it when I feel
Right,
like it.
exactly.
I never
Right.
feel like it.
That's
You build a house, you have to have the foundation,
Yeah.
right? There's a
That's the crazy thing to me, though, is that, you know, it sounds simple in a lot of ways, and it is in some ways, but there's this fine balance, you know? There's a balance that you have to find, you know? And sometimes, like you're saying, like, sometimes I feel like I just gotta show up. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
just show up. Like, that means just show up to a service on a Sunday when I don't really feel like being there. Or a devotional, right? Or praying when I don't really feel like doing it, right? But then there's also the ritual side that comes right along that, and it's like, if I do it a lot, well, then I start to get impressed with myself, and then I, you know, now it becomes a religious thing, and then, and so it's always, I feel like they're always right there, you know, competing.
Right.
And that's where Satan's trying to get us out again, get away from Christ,
Right.
anything to move you away.
What did he say to Cain? The devil's sitting at the door, ready to pounce on you.
yeah, pounce it, yeah. Right.
Always.
Always waiting.
We
Yeah.
need the body
Roaring
to
lion.
surround us and protect us and to tell us when we're off. I mean, there was a good brother I know that many years ago was going to marry this young lady, and we did what you would call an intervention today, and he was very upset, but
Wow.
he didn't marry her, and he came back and said it was the best thing you guys ever did.
You saved my
Because
life.
it was when we were East Meadow, we were young,
Yeah,
and we were in your. If we had a problem, we said, "Listen, let's sit down." Like it says in the
Right.
scriptures, one or two.
Right.
If not, you go to the whole body, and we walk that through. And now I would say, a successful Christian. He's down south with a lot of big family, and they're all Christians. And he said to us a few days, he said that was the best thing that happened to me.
You know, it makes me think of, and again, I keep mentioning, but Pastor Linda, years ago, she threw an author in my face. You got to read this guy, Parker Palmer, and he's a Quaker.
Oh, I don't know.
Never.
Oh,
Oh,
Quakers, love
gosh.
the Quakers.
All right. Well, and we've talked about this in church before. She did before I ever did, about clearness committees, and you made me think of that. How different the church would be and a clearness committee is. You get people that are close to you in the church, or leaders in the church, and they ask you questions about, you have a big job decision, you know, or
Yes.
something,
Mhm.
buying a house, whatever it may be, big life decisions. And people will ask you questions. And how many times, again, going back to the independent spirit, the Antichrist spirit that is in the church and in the world, that people are like, I'm going to make my own decision. I'm not going to ask anybody. But for them, again, they were just asking questions.
Yeah.
And and trying to help that person really hear God. Man, I'd love to go back to stuff like that.
That's fantastic. Because most of the time we make decisions and then build our theology behind that decision. Because that's what I want.
But that was what, and God was telling me that instead of asking other people, again, God could have given somebody a word,
Absolutely.
but many times,
More
Yeah.
questions is better than more answers, I think. Just give me here's another question for you. Here's another question. Why are you doing this? And when you start thinking about it,
shouldn't we ask more questions of
Absolutely.
people? I mean, I'm deviating a little bit, but
Some people that know me would probably say no because I already asked too many questions.
Well, Robert Kennedy, right? His famous quotes was, "I have a lot of people around me with a lot of answers, but I need is some people with some good questions."
Yeah.
wow, I never heard that
Yeah.
before. That's good. I might have to use that. Do you mind if I take that? Use
You
that
can
in a U.S.
Google.
history classroom? Google that.
My father-in-law used to, when I showed him, I gave him a tablet and he used to play with it, and then he would ask me questions and I would just Google it and go, "Why are you getting all these answers?" But then he learned, so we could always just Google and there's so much information at our fingertips.
Fingertips. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of what
Before.
you said just now reminds me of a little bit what you were talking about on Sunday. I mean, at the end of the day, we talked before this today, and Paul talked about the difference between getting meat and getting milk, right?
Yeah.
And
Talk
as
to
a
that.
baby,
That's good. Yeah.
as a baby, you feed your babies milk because that's what they need, and they can't digest certain things at a certain age, right? But as we get older, well, we don't go out to a restaurant and order milk. We order steaks and whatever. You're vegan, you get some nice vegan dish or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's hardier. It's you got to work a little more. Your body's got to do things. That's spiritually what we're talking about. Like walking into, because when you say a conversation like a clearance committee or telling somebody the truth about who you're going to marry, and that's tough. That's hard work, and a lot of us don't want that.
Right.
But we do want it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want it, but we don't want it.
Right.
It's hard in the short term, but look at the pain this person maybe has saved in the long run. So
As it relates to that, to be totally honest, I know 20 years ago, after I had an awakening, and I can remember the spot when I was at the Montauk retreat, and I'll never forget there was just prayer that was going on, and a brother was praying that's not even in the church. Somebody I'd grown up with, a really good guy, but I'll never forget that moment. And after that, I gotta tell you, I was very big into these seeker churches that were around, and Willow Creek, and you may have heard the name before, Bill Hybels. And I remember, and I go back, I was in my early 20s, on fire for God, and, Pastor Linda, she was a little hesitant, a little reserved about this, and now as you grow and you mature, I see, I'm like, wow, how dangerous some of that was, and how I thought I was really seeing clearly, and I guess part of just the church, and for my own, again, maturation in the Lord and as a leader.
Their intentions were good. They wanted to bring people into the kingdom.
Right.
But they really weren't.
Again, going back to the milk and the meat and understanding that, I said I don't think I said it to you guys, but I'm at the point now, I think it takes a while that you can't really care what man thinks or what people, but again, it wasn't always, it takes a while to get there.
Right.
To
I think
go,
there's
wow.
a big difference between the first half of life and the second half. And I don't mean that chronologically.
No,
Some people
you're
have
right,
an early
yeah.
second half.
Yes.
But there is that first half where you have, listen, if you're going to lay down your life and your soul, you have to have something. You have to have built that. You have to have your
You're
own
going to go
structures.
through hell, right? To get,
Right.
in a lot of ways, or no?
No, that's true. And to get back to your point about milk, the problem with that is somebody else has already digested that. The mother or the cow, and it's something that somebody else has digested already. So the big
Wow, I never looked at it that way.
have not really been given to you. Well, I'll tell you why.
That's good.
Because
Did you hear that, audience? I hope you heard that. That's really good.
well, here's something you may not. So all the years I've been doing devotionals, and I think God said to me, "That's a great person who you're doing a devotional, but they've already chewed on that, and they're giving you the milk."
Right.
So I've already sort of backed away from devotionals
Right.
and gone right to the Word and asked God to speak to me. It doesn't happen all the time, but
Right,
instead of just
right.
having devotionals, have the meat. Let me speak to you directly.
You know what you made me think of when you said that? I think the church, and it goes back to what we were saying before too, I think people come in and they live off of the life of the minute. They live off of the life, whatever Pastor James, Pastor Linda, whomever is up there. They live off of the life of the leader of the church. And look at the Western church. We've exalted these people and we've put them on pedestals. And it's even if they don't live in that area, whether it's T.D. Jakes, and listen, I love T.D. Jakes,
Great guy.
whomever it is, right? A great preacher,
Spiritual
a great leader,
Yeah.
whomever it is. But we've exalted these leaders, and people look at them, and that's where they get God, and
Another
it's dangerous.
example that came to me is that we should be living in the daylight of the sun, right? Problem is, if you get something off of T.D.
Yeah.
Jakes, it's the moon, right? The sun's reflecting off the moon, and you're getting moonlight instead of sunlight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can get around. I might not get into an accident driving or walking, but it's not the daylight of God and His Word speaking directly to you. And that's why I think a lot of Christians are like, I'm not sure where to go, what to do. It's because their whole life has been moonlight and not the light of the sun.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, no.
Anything else on that? No? Can I give you I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to give you a quote from a book. The book is The Spanish Flu Epidemic and Its Influence on History, right, by Jamie Britnauer. Toward the end of the book, this is what he writes. Ready for this? He says, perhaps the most lasting legacy... I didn't tell them about this either. I'm just bringing this up.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Spanish flu, which happened in 1917 and 18.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, so the biggest pandemic okay, this pales obviously in comparison. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Spanish flu is that it barely left a legacy at all. This is the author's assertion. Okay? While it has continued to be studied and analyzed in certain circles, scientific circles, the collective memory seemed to stub it out and hurry to move on. And what resonated with me, barely left a legacy. 700,000 Americans, millions of people lost their lives. Okay, what will the legacy be of this? I want you to bring it to the church too. What do you think the legacy, if you have an answer for
It's
this?
funny you say that, James, because I do a lot of reading, right? I do a lot of reading. I read Bloomberg. I'm seeing what the world is saying because that's where I live. And you're already seeing headlines that, do you think the college system is broken? Don't be so quick to think about that. And those, you're already seeing people saying, oh, this was a game changer. This was right. And now they're saying, well, I don't think it's such a game changer. And then 3 years from now, if there's a vaccine, it's like, oh, we'll pass that. Well, that was just a bump in the road. I'm worried that, okay, if the world wants to do that, fine. Let them go back. But as a church,
Thank you.
we can't go back to what was, quote, normal, which really wasn't normal. It was a-normal, right?
So we're going to go back to Egypt like the Israelites did.
Yeah, I want meat.
Right. Yeah, I want meat.
Egypt.
Yeah.
Give me vegetables.
I want to be in slavery again. I want to be in bondage.
Just manic stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a real, like in business and math, you talk about reversion to the mean. Eventually, everything goes back to the middle and the average. And I think people will go back to where they let's say 90%.
Yeah.
10% can start thinking outside the box. I think the world changes.
Yeah. I think, I just reminded of the fact that in these simple truths that we have to remember that the church is not a place or an organization or it's us, it's people, it's you, it's me, it's everybody, right? So the change that you're talking about has to start with me. I have to start to look at my life differently because all these things that we're talking about, we're all in this world, this culture, loving out the world. I mean, we're in a world that is against Christ. A lot of the values and things that are found in this country, we just celebrate Memorial Day and, we've got a long history and we thank you for every veteran and everybody that served in the military out there and died for such a great, one of the greatest nations that ever be on this planet. And we look now at the culture though, and it's not. There was a time, I always remember Pastor Tom once said, when he was talking about his kids, we're talking to his kids and saying, see, these are American values and we have Christian values and they're not always the same. And there was a day when we used to be able to say that you could,
really good.
there was a day when we used to look at our kids and you could say, oh yeah, that's an American value, apple pie, and that's what we believe in God, and it lined up with the scripture, and you didn't have to continue the conversation because your kids walked away and knew it meant God and family and putting your country and sacrifice and serving. Those were values in this country. A lot of that has changed, and as a parent, I find, you see all the time, we all had it growing up, right? Situational ethics, or if you're in this situation, what do you do? That's when you find out really where your compass is, where your North Star, where's your guiding light. And a lot of times in this culture, it lacked. There is no compass, there is no North Star, because it's make it up as you go. That's not Christianity. Right?
There's no absolute truth.
There's no absolute truth, and there's a Holy Spirit that is still in this world that if we tap in because he's willing and able. He's always there. We need to listen more, talk less, like I'm doing too much now,
No,
and
not
and
at
then
all.
just
That's the point of
but
you sitting here.
be led by that Holy Spirit to take us, and that as a church, as a family, as a husband, as a wife, as a daughter, as an employee, like they're every.
But
phase of our
like,
life.
even look at like sports. I mean, you think about one of the idols in our culture that has been
Yeah.
challenged during this.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, we're all guys that love sports.
Yeah.
We all played sports
Right.
our entire lives.
Yeah.
So we're not people that like we're very in touch and we love football, whatever it is. You name the sport, we love it,
Yeah.
right? To
That's
some
all
extent,
right.
but you see it in American value going on what you're saying here in the idolatry, even with youth sports.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
everybody. I just want to go back to my kids and playing all these sports and doing all these different activities, and I'm like, man, we can't go back. It's not a Christian value. It's in direct conflict with Christian values. Not again, playing sports, great, wonderful, but at what cost?
At what cost?
At what cost?
Missing Sundays.
You know,
Travel teams. It just
Yeah.
takes these kids out of regular society from when they were 6 or 7 if they're very good at what they're doing, right? 8 or 9, and all of a sudden, where is it? Oh, he's at practice or she's at practice.
Yeah.
It takes away their childhood.
Yeah.
You know, you said that that this is a good time, and we also said it before about the church. We said the church has left the building. Maybe this is the best. We are the church, so we have left the building. That's what it's supposed to look like, I guess. I'm just thinking about
No,
our
it's so secure in
conversation.
the building. We want to be
Yeah,
there. There's
right,
walls and
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
no,
it's so nice that we're outside of the actual building. Let's
Yeah.
be the church,
Right.
be salt and light
right.
out
Amen.
there.
Right. Oh, like
Yeah.
Luke said in Luke chapter 5, push your boat out where it's a little bit deeper,
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit
a
more
little deeper.
dangerous. No, I want to be. I want
I want to be near the
to be
shore.
near the shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny when you say that, push your boat out and it's a little more dangerous. I mean, as a church, I think, that's a little bit of the problem, I think, in our Western culture is that because the culture is so much in the church, like, it's hard to distinguish the church from the world. And there was a day, we can go name a bunch of preachers, going back to the great revivals of the past. That message that was being preached was the exact 180-degree opposite
Yes.
of what the culture was saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was a cost for that.
very good.
And people, you paid a price for that, but you know what? People got saved, and people got saved to meet Christ. Because sometimes I question who are we saving people? Like where are we
What are we bringing them to? What's the goal
yeah,
of what we
yeah,
have?
because
here?
sometimes I think,
It's about people. Is it about people? Is it about numbers?
or
Right.
what are we saving them from? Or are they running from something? It's just sometimes I think we're not bringing them to Christ. We're bringing them to something that's a watered down version of Christ, where we stamp it because we don't really want to go too
Right.
much against the world. And I think that was the downside of that Seeker movie you mentioned. Like good intentions, and it was like, hey, let's just gather people and draw them in, and then we'll get them saved.
It was supposed to bring them to the
Right.
next step, and then
Right.
Right.
But
that
the
whole
next
reveal
step
study
never
came out.
happened, and I think
Yeah.
we've, and what happens with, it's almost more harm than if you never touch those people. In my, this is one of my own.
I agree. It's a
Because
booster shot.
I think they walk
That's a good
away
idea.
from that and go, well, you're no different than the world.
Yeah, you're right.
So you don't have anything different from me. So I've already tried that.
Right.
So now when
Absolutely,
somebody wants to tell you the real gospel, it's much harder to get through.
Many of these
Yeah.
churches do exactly the opposite of what God wants them to do, and they're turning people away
Yeah.
from Christianity.
And I guess you just got to ask, well, why do we do it? Because we said none of these people are ill-willed, right? So
Wow,
we
good
take
intentions.
the broad road. We take the easy path. A lot of times, there's a cost, right? You may lose some friends. You maybe have trouble getting a job. There's a lot of stuff.
Hey, I'd be lying to you if I said
It's tough.
going into even a series like this in the church and touching topics that
Yeah.
that a lot of because
It's like a
one
third
thing
rail
that
or
I've been
somewhere.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what this, but the support to have people around and say, no, this is the right message for this hour, and we need to be,
There's a lot of depth. I mean, again, having been around in different churches,
right.
you have grown up. John was out a little bit and came back like I
Right.
did, but those of you who've grown up in this church, let me just say, there's a lot of depth here. You don't know compared to going out there. And can I do a sports analogy?
We all of us.
Where everybody remembers Joe Namath in Super Bowl III, they were going to get crushed by Baltimore. And they asked, I think the quarterback for the other team in Baltimore was the MVP of the league. And they said to Joe Namath, do you have any quarterbacks as good as this guy in your league? And Namath said, we have 5 guys. Like LaMonica, he was right when you look back years later, but he was ridiculed. There was depth in that organization that in the whole league that nobody saw. And I think it's the same here with us in terms of there's so much depth here in terms of saints who have put a stake in the ground for many years ago. Your parents, and other sisters and brothers who've been here. Some of them still have gone on, in different states, but they laid down their life and they said, "We are for Him."
Amen.
We don't know what that means completely, but Jesus is Lord, and that's what we're going to proclaim in this locale.
Yeah.
And that's really got to where people like us can talk about things that are a little bit deeper than some of the rest of the churches. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, and some people want to live. That's okay if people.
If you want Christian life,
then
no
Christian
life.
It's funny on a business side of things. I mean, I think of this in my own life, the way I try to lead sometimes, and if I always say to myself and I say to others, if everybody's agreeing with you all the time, you're not doing something right.
Said that to mom.
And I think as a church, it's the same principle, right? I mean, if everybody likes us so much, and there's no cost, and that everybody just says you're doing such a great job and just keep doing what you're doing, like that's the dangerous place to be. And you said having people in your life, and that's what it is. You need, speaking truth, say, hey, I think, you got a blind spot here. Maybe you're going off the rails a little bit. And as a church, you need that too, right? So you talk to other churches and then there's the spirit that you need to rely on that's leading you. And that's the one thing about this church that has always been true. I've found it. I used to laugh. I've told my parents this, I used to laugh as a kid. I'd be a teenager. And as a church, there's broad themes that the church may go into, right? It's a faith teaching, and then it's something else. And I've always saw over my life that, we would start moving into something that was a little different than what you'd kind of see and hear out there. And then the magazines would start coming in the house, and they'd be all doing the same thing that we were doing like 2 months before that. And I'd laugh because I couldn't tell you how many times I saw that happen.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so I guess I just say that, not to pat us on the back, but to say that, trusting the leadership here to know that the number one goal, the number one intent is to be led by the Spirit, to meet and commune with Jesus, period's hard stop. Like everything else is secondary. That's the goal and the heart of this church. It always has been. I hope and pray it always will be. I think it will. But that's why we have these conversations, right? Because we have an opportunity in front of us to say, okay, what do we do next? Because you can go back, like you're saying, it's easy to go back and do what we did before.
But what I like also is the leadership says, what's the Lord saying?
Right.
Right? When you even have the prayer team get together, they'll say, what's the mind of the Lord in this issue?
Right.
Is it for this to happen or that to happen?
Right.
The world would say 90%, well, it's got to be this. Well, we need to get the mind of the Lord. And that's you don't hear
That's
that.
good.
Yeah.
That's really good. You know what, guys? Why don't we kind of close
Great.
on that? That was really good. That was like an advertisement.
I heard that from somebody. I think it was your mother, my sister, but we won't name any names.
That's really good. Hey,
Never
I
heard
can't
of
tell you. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed.
Sorry,
this.
your mother.
Never heard of it.
You were first. You were first.
True. Really, I really can't thank you guys enough for coming these 2 weeks
That's my
and
pleasure.
sharing. And these guys are really busy. They're in the business world. They have a lot of responsibility. They have their own kids. Your kids are grown up. Your kids are a little bit younger. But really appreciate you as brothers in the Lord. You know the Word, but you're also students of culture, right? Like the Apostle Paul was, and understanding what's going. We have to be. So listen, church. As we close here, this is not business as usual. As we move out of the and you should be praying, as couples, your families, about what is God saying to you about your life. What do you need? We said last week, and I have to get into it this week. What do we need to learn and unlearn? What do we need to unlearn? I'm going to hit that a little bit. And what's essential? Christ has to be essential as we move out of this. Let's take that word with us. Not just leave it in the pandemic. I want to take it out, right? And bring it into our everyday life. And Christ has to be first and foremost with that. And so we want you to be praying with us, listening to what the Spirit is saying to the church here at City on a Hill and to the church at large, because God's speaking. And the old way of doing things, we want to be in line with that, be in the river.
Amen.
So you prayed last week, I think. You're going to pray this week.
Okay.
That's right.
Amen. doing things differently.
Yeah, amen.
Lord, we thank you that you came and you did things completely differently than what the world was thinking.
Yeah.
You came and you showed strength, laying down your life for the poor and for the proud and for everybody in between. Lord, show us the way. Help us as to think outside the box, but not just to be different, Lord. We don't want to be different to be different. We
Amen.
want to follow you.
Yeah, amen.
We want to know the living way where we pick up our own cross and follow you and proclaim, as John said at the communion, that you died for us and we're remembering you and we're proclaiming you to the world, but we're also looking for your return. We thank you for this time. We thank you, John and I. We're thanking the leadership for the invite. Bless the leadership of our church. Bless the brothers and sisters of our church. Let them know your love, the depth and the width and the height, and that they would know the peace of God that goes beyond understanding. In your name, amen.
Wow, that was a great prayer. Thank you.
Amen.
Hey, we love you. We'll see you on Sunday.
Amen.